My name is Ed Ra. I'm the ranking member on the Ways and Means Committee, and I'm happy to be here with my colleagues today to talk about an issue that is impacting an increasing number of our counties and municipalities around this state, and that's migrants that have come into our country and are being relocated into a number of different counties. Obviously, we all know in the last week or so there was a lot of talk in the Hudson Valley, in Rockland, and now in Westchester, and now there's some migrants being potentially resettled down on Long Island. So we wanted to talk about our approach to this issue. We have a number of our colleagues who have introduced pieces of legislation to try to take a holistic approach to this issue. I would say at the outset, obviously, it is our belief that the federal government does need to step up and do something. They have really fallen asleep on the job with regard to this and allowing people to come in droves. But obviously, New York City, a long time ago, made the decision they wanted to be a sanctuary city, and now they're struggling to deal with this issue and trying to push it onto many of our counties at great financial cost and having other impacts on our counties, which several of my colleagues will talk about. So I'm going to turn it over to a couple of my colleagues in a minute, but I'm going to first talk about in the budget. Many people know there was $1 billion that was set aside for New York City to deal with this issue, with the hope that New York City would match that money and the federal government would match that money. We don't know what the feds are doing at this point, that no such promise has been made in terms of the funding, but I think it's incumbent upon us as a state to make sure there's transparency and accountability with regard to this $1 billion. It's going to go through state agencies, but I introduced a piece of legislation yesterday that would create a real reporting system where the agencies that are expending this funding would have to report to the legislature periodically how it's going out, would have to report any federal funding that's being matched or going out along with it, as well as allowing for some oversight by the state comptroller, because $1 billion is a lot of money. And I think we want to know how it's being spent in addressing this crisis.
I just want to be clear. Let's be very, very clear. This is a complete failure by the Biden administration, by Governor Hochul, and by the city of New York. Due to poor planning and political policies, we are not showing compassion on this issue. Compassion not just for the veterans that are being displaced and the communities and the weddings that are getting pushed, but also those legal asylum seekers themselves who are part of these groups that are looking for a better life. This is their introduction to the United States of America, the greatest country in the world, and we should all be embarrassed about what is happening right now. You've all heard widely reported that a group of homeless veterans were booted out of one of the hotels where there are now many migrants placed. But what we are now hearing is that we have active service members in the reserves who are placed at Stewart Air National Guard. We have Army, Marine, and Air Guard contingents there that are having issues with their hotels being canceled, with where are they going to be placed for their upcoming drill weekends. So not only are we dishonoring our local combat veterans who are being displaced, we are jeopardizing our military readiness. And it's only going to get worse before it gets better. So I'll be introducing a piece of legislation that specifically cracks down on hotels, and we are going to make sure that, specifically dealing with the migrant crisis, they can't just cancel contracts they have with wedding parties, with veterans, with reservists who are on duty to be ready to serve our country on a moment's notice, and other at-risk nonprofits that may be already impacted by this crisis. We believe that this is just the tip of the iceberg, and we know so many more people are being displaced all over the country. We've shined a light on it here in New York State, in the Hudson Valley, and we hope that others will stand up, come out of the shadows, and talk about their situations as well. Because with enough people coming together, we can hopefully do something about this. My colleagues are now going to talk about transparency, about the $1 billion and other aspects of this issue. But for those people that are watching, for the residents of the state of New York, that are being put on the back burner. We have your back, and we have some solutions to this crisis.
So what my colleagues said before me is 100% true. It's our policies, especially in New York City, that are hurting New York State. It's focused, moving upward. We're supposed to be upward in good things. This isn't good. What we're seeing is, in New York City now, they're taking away gymnasiums from our elementary and middle schools all across the 5 boroughs. They're housing them in the gym with no showers, maybe a fountain of water. They got cots all settled in there. And our kids are not getting access to their gyms. Right now, there's currently a list of 6 schools like that in New York City. You know, in Staten Island, we've been dealing with this since October of last year, when they moved the migrants into hotels on the West Shore. I don't know what's wrong with the city, but it's not like they didn't see this coming. The federal government, how could they not see it coming? The expiration of certain rules and regulations. You know, just to put this into perspective, we want to show empathy. We want to show compassion. It's a humanitarian effort. But think about this. Someone comes in, a migrant, they're requesting asylum, and people say, well, they'll get their day in court. Instead of letting them go back to their country and wait to get in legally, we give them a court date here in the United States. Roughly now, it's a 4-year wait that person stays in the United States unchecked. 2027 is the first hearing available lately. That's unacceptable. And that falls at the feet of Congress and the White House. So, like my colleague said before me, we're all here offering solutions. I've offered a bill that would prevent New York City or any other municipality in the state from using that state funding that we put together in the budget to house adult migrants in New York City schools, in any public schools, or any private schools in New York State. They can't go into a child care facility. They can't be housed in any other facility that serves those under 18 years old. You know, in an ironic twist, we were successful in getting New York City to lock the front doors for security. It was a 10-year battle that I took on, advocating for it with some of my colleagues here long before we were in office. And here they are, leaving the door unlocked again. That's what we're looking at. So the bottom line is, we need real solutions, and real solutions is having empathy, not only for our communities, but for the migrants too. We keep shuffling them around. Where is the dignity in that? There is none. So I'm hoping that we get to a place where people start listening. The people at Congress, people in the White House, and the people in City Hall in New York City. It's long past time that we do this right. Thank you.
One of the things that Assemblyman Marr didn't say is that Assemblyman Marr is a reservist himself. And whether it's combat veterans or, as he said, impacting our readiness, I can't think of anything more un-American than pushing out our veterans and our combat soldiers and being displaced by migrants who are here illegally. And I think it's something that really needs to be taken a hard look at, and I appreciate you bringing that forward, Assemblyman Marr. I think this is really a wake-up call for New York State. I think this is a wake-up call for New York City. And as, again, my colleagues have already pointed out, their politically misguided policies are acting as a magnet that brings the crisis at the southern border not to our backyards, but to our front yards. We heard from Homeland Secretary Mayorkas, who's now saying that they're releasing the migrants at the southern border on their honor. What does that mean, on their honor? It means that there's no way of contacting them when they have to go appear for their court date. It means that they are now just being dispersed throughout communities all across the United States of America, and because of the policies that are in place here in New York State and in New York City, specifically the right to shelter law, they're coming right here to our front yard. I've introduced legislation that will require New York State to register all these migrants, to perform background checks, fingerprint, and track them until they are given their asylum status by the federal government. We are spending billions of dollars of taxpayer money here in the state of New York. Taxpayers deserve to know who these people are, and they deserve to know that there's a system in place that they're not going to fall through the cracks and just be continuously a victim of a broken immigration system led by President Biden.